Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be covering my pick for the best Barbarian build in Baldur's Gate 3. This build is going to focus on the strengths of Barbarian as a class, namely outputting an enormous amount of damage. So it will be perfect for Karlach or a main character Tav as a damage-dealing melee combatant in your party. This build will focus primarily on the two strengths of Barbarian that are its main features as a class: Rage, of course the signature Barbarian class feature, and Reckless Attack, giving you advantage on every attack, allowing you to maximize one of the best feats in the game. Before I begin, I also just want to quickly shout out Jonalov Holt for the 25 kroner donation. Thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate it. Alright, so let's get into the build. So first up, when we are using Karlach as the example character here, something that I should note is that Zariel Tiefling may be the worst race for Barbarian in the game. The reason for that is that what it gives you uniquely are bonus smite attacks, which are both spells and bonus actions. Barbarians really badly need their bonus actions because they use them to rage as well as to jump, which is very important, and extra attacks if you are a Berserker Barbarian. Barbarians also, of course, cannot cast or concentrate on spells while raging, meaning you can't use the smites that Zariel Tiefling gets. So there's sort of an inherent contradiction to Karlach's character. If you're building this for a main character, the best race is, as always, Wood Elf, because the bonus movement speed synergizes very well with Barbarian's existing bonus movement speed and is incredibly powerful for this character. You can also consider Duergar for the Enlarge, which is kind of fun, but overall I think that you are going to be best off by far with a Wood Elf for a Barbarian. Alright, the next thing that we need to do is take a look at these stats. Karlach's starting stats are not as bad for a Barbarian as many of the other Origin characters' beginning stats, but there's definitely some optimizations that we can make. For one thing, we don't need any charisma on a Barbarian, so that will allow us to get our numbers to even, giving us a very standard stat split of 16, 14, 16, 8, 12, 8. You're going to want this on pretty much every melee character because it gives you health, good to hit chance, and allows you to reach 20 strength using only 2 ASIs, as well as good initiative and armor for Barbarians. However, Barbarians actually have a use for more dexterity than other melee characters because we are going to be spending our time in medium armor, and many medium armors will allow you to apply your entire dexterity bonus to your armor class. Barbarians also get to, when they are unarmored, apply their constitution to their armor class in addition to their dexterity. So any bonus dex or con that we can get is better. So if we are really looking to min-max this build, the optimal stat split is actually not this. It's the much more weird-looking 17, 15, 16, 8, 8, 8. The reason that this is so powerful is that it lets you get to 16 dexterity and 18 strength with your first ASI, maximizing your physical stats for a Barbarian. Obviously, there's a lot of people who prefer not to have 3 -1 modifiers, and so I wanted to provide both stat spreads for you, but this is going to be the optimal stat spread if you're just looking to make the strongest character possible. Another reason for this is that Wisdom is typically an important saving throw because so many of the worst effects in the game target your Wisdom save, but Barbarian actually gets to ignore many of those because of immunities that you will get later on down the line. For our skills, the only really important thing is making sure that we have athletics proficiency. This is incredibly important for every melee character because in Baldur's Gate, shoving enemies as a bonus action is extremely powerful. Repositioning enemies back into fields on the battlefield or off of cliffs is incredibly strong and very useful for you to be able to do in-game. So with our stat split selected and our class selected, let's get into it. Barbarians get 2 main features. You get Rage, which you can activate to deal 2 additional damage, as well as gain resistance to all physical damage. You also get more hit points than many other characters, which means that even as a low armor class character, since we're going to be using a 2-handed weapon, we end up quite a bit tankier than many other characters that are fighting in melee combat. Between the resistances from rage as well as the bonus hit points, your Barbarian will be able to stay alive longer, even as a damage dealing focused version of the character, than another class would be able to in that spot. At level 2, we get Reckless Attack, which allows you to make attacks with advantage, but enemies then have advantage on their attacks against you. This will decrease your survivability, but increase your damage output. You can, in Baldur's Gate, choose to roll your attack recklessly after you see if you have missed or not, although there is a disadvantage to doing it this way. Usually you're going to want to do that, though. I should mention that right off the start, that usually you will want to choose whether or not to recklessly attack based on whether you hit or not. But if you choose to use Reckless Attack before you see the results of the swing, you double your chance at getting a critical hit. The game will not allow you to decide to add an extra reckless die and see if you get a critical hit after you've already seen the results of the first roll. So you need to select this in advance if you want to double your chance of getting a critical hit. This can be extremely important because obviously there are some times where you just really need a critical hit, and so you should decide in advance whether it's worth the extra 5% chance-ish of getting a critical hit compared to not having enemies gain advantage on their attacks against you. Especially against spellcasters and ranged attackers who won't necessarily be able to attack you easily, it's going to be very useful sometimes to select Reckless Attack before you attack rather than waiting to see the results of the first roll. You also get the Danger Sense class feature, which is mostly irrelevant, though a nice little boost, I suppose. As we continue to level up, we get to make our most important selection of our levels, which is what subclass we're going to be. By default, the game suggests that you pick Wildheart, but that's actually not what we're going to pick if we want to sort of maximize the effectiveness of our Barbarian, especially in the early game. Berserker Barbarian has two major advantages, really three major advantages. One is that in Frenzied Rage, you get the ability to make an additional attack as well as a thrown weapon attack as a bonus action, at the cost of reducing your to-hit chances further in combat. Being able to make a second attack starting at level 3, and this is a fully functional main hand attack using all of your stats and bonuses and everything, with a two-handed weapon usually, is earlier than every other character gets access to this, and of course it's going to be in addition to your extra attack feature that we'll get later down the line. You also get the bonus action Throw, which is incredibly valuable both for thrown weapons as well as for repositioning enemies, throwing creatures. For all the reasons I talked about pushing being good, throwing enemies is even better because you do damage to them as well as knock enemies prone. Knocking enemies prone is extremely strong because you get advantage against them, which is very good. Less powerful for barbarians than for other melee characters, but still extremely powerful. This combos well with certain throwing-focused builds, but this build is going to focus primarily on melee attacks. You still, I think, prefer Berserker Barbarian just because making more attacks is better than making fewer attacks. And this is yet another reason that Barbarians really like having their bonus action available. You won't be able to do this in the first round of combat because Rage is a bonus action, so only starting in the second round will you be able to make your second attack, but even so, this makes Barbarians the best sustained damage output character in the game, and will allow them to continue to output massive damage even throughout very long fights by making additional attacks. At level 4, we get a feat, and of course we took these two odd numbers, which means that we definitely need to increase those both to even numbers. This is going to get you additional initiative and AC, as well as additional to-hit chance, and so of course evening out these numbers is very good. Something to consider is if you took the stat spread that has only even numbers to begin, is you could consider at this level taking Great Weapon Master, which this build will take at level 8, at level 4. The reason for this is that you have advantage on every attack, so you can mitigate the to-hit penalty of Great Weapon Master by using Reckless Attack. Advantage on a roll against most enemies. If you need to roll between a 6 and a 14 to hit, then advantage is worth, on average, about plus 4.5, so more or less negates the -5 attack roll penalty. It's going to end up being slightly harder to hit with Great Weapon Master and Reckless Attack than without either most of the time, but of course plus 10 damage makes up for it, and typically, even with the hit penalty, plus 10 damage on every attack is going to mean you do more average damage, even without Reckless Attack, but Barbarian gets to ignore that and do significantly increased average damage starting at level 4 if you want to go that route. This version of the build wants to prioritize getting more AC, so we're going to put Great Weapon Master in at level 8, but I wanted to mention that as an alternative for those of you building the other version. At level 5, of course, we get the most important class feature in the game for melee characters, Extra Attack. This does slightly reduce the value of your Berserker Barbarian attack, but 3 attacks per round is still better than 2 attacks per round, and you also get Fast Movement. Fast Movement increasing by 10 feet while not wearing heavy armor means that you have a default move speed of 40 feet, or 50 feet if you get a buff from an ally with Long Strider. Fast Movement is one of the most powerful abilities in the game, and of course is very important for Barbarians, giving you tremendous map mobility. In addition to your very high strength, this will allow you, in combination with jumps, to cross just about every arena in the game in a single turn. There's only a couple that are larger than that, and make sure that you are attacking priority targets right off the beginning. One of the best things your Barbarian can be doing is diving the back line of the enemy lines, getting on archers or mages before they get a chance to get their spells off or arrows off, allowing you to take them out of the fight before those very threatening ranged attackers can do damage to your team. At Barbarian level 6, we get something very important from Berserker Barbarian, and this is actually the main reason that I think Berserker Barbarian is the best class, giving you Mindless Rage, because you can't be charmed or frightened while in rage here. The reason for this is, or the reason that this is so powerful is that this allows us to dump Wisdom, like we did right at the beginning, because mostly Wisdom saving throws are going to be targeting against either some version of Charm or some version of Frightened. There will still be some Wisdom targeting effects that will be able to hit you during this, during your Mindless Rage, but the ability to ignore those two means that we can more or less ignore an otherwise important saving throw and still be fully efficient in combat without having to worry about our Wisdom saves. This lets the Barbarian keep going in circumstances where many other characters wouldn't be able to. At level 7, we actually get one of the top 2 or 3 class features in the entire game, and this is the main reason to stick with Barbarian this long, and not dip into another class at this point. Feral Instinct gives you +3 initiative, and you can't be surprised. That actually comes up quite a lot in certain story missions. Not being able to be surprised is a huge boost. If you've watched any of my build guides, you know how much I love the feat Alert. And +3 initiative and can't be surprised is 3/5 of Alert as a class feature, not costing you a feat, which is incredibly powerful. One reason for this is that in Baldur's Gate 3, as opposed to tabletop, initiative rolls are made on a d4 rather than a d20. So a +3 bonus is almost the entire value of your possible rolls in addition to that roll, meaning that you are extremely likely to win initiative. If you win initiative, you get to decide what you get to dictate the pace of combat. Going first is always better than going second, and it's extremely valuable if your whole team has high initiative, because then not only do you get to go before the enemies, you also get to choose the order in which your characters act. What this means is that you can have your wizard buff your barbarian before your barbarian runs into attack, or you can have your barbarian run next to an enemy before your rogue goes up to them to make a sneak attack against that enemy. You want your whole team to have better initiative than the whole enemy team, because then you can choose the order in which your characters act, allowing you to maximize the effectiveness of your characters by applying buffs or supporting one another in combat. Something to keep in mind about initiative too, and this is kind of a misconception that I think people have that I want to just briefly clarify, is that winning initiative means you will get an extra turn in combat, typically, because in every combat that you win, you will take the last turn, because after that, enemies are dead. So if the turns go enemies, then you, then enemies, then you each get 2 turns. But if the turns go you, then enemies, then you, then enemies, then you get 3 turns to their 2. So winning initiative actually increases the number of turns you are going to take throughout the course of the game by a significant margin, since, especially because a lot of combats will end in a couple turns, you can often end up increasing the total number of turns that your party has taken throughout Baldur's Gate by, like, numbers in the hundreds or even possibly thousands. So very important to consider winning initiative in those terms. It's one of the most important effects in the game. Alright, we've gotten through my contractually obligated minute of singing the praises of initiative. Let's go on to the next level of the build. At this point, there's not actually a lot keeping us in Barbarian, but of course we want to go, we're already level 7, so we want to go to level 8 to get our feat, and the feat that we're going to take, for the reasons I already discussed, is Great Weapon Master. You will want to have this on pretty much all of the time. You won't use the bonus action attack that often, because your bonus actions are going to be typically used for rage or frenzy attacks, but it does save you a stacking frenzy exhaustion penalty if you do happen to kill something or get a critical hit, and you are twice as likely to critical hit since you're going to be using reckless attack very frequently. Advantage not only makes you more likely to hit, it doubles the chance of crits, so it doubles the chance of this bonus being used. The average damage with Great Weapon Master applied is going to be significantly higher than the average damage without, and remember that we're making 3 attacks every turn, typically, so we will often end up with plus 30 damage per turn from this feat, meaning often the difference between killing an enemy in a single round or letting them live for a round. Very important to get this feat at this point in the game, and as I mentioned, you may even want to consider getting it early if you don't take the odd number stat split. At this point, though, we've pretty much gotten everything that we need to get out of the Barbarian class. Brutal Critical is nice, but it's just 1 additional damage die, so if you use the most common 2-handed weapon, a maul or a greatsword that rolls 2d6, then that will change your critical hit from 4d6 just to 5d6, so it's a very marginal increase in damage, and we can actually do quite a bit better by dipping into another class. The other class that we are going to dip into, of course, and you may have been able to guess this one, is Fighter. This gets you a fighting style, which is incredibly valuable as well, allowing you to select Great Weapon Fighting, increasing the average damage of your attacks by a pretty significant margin, and also, I talked about this quite a bit in my basic guide for Paladins, so check that one out if you haven't. The value of this increases the more different dice you're rolling, so any weapons that roll multiple dice, like mauls or greatsword, benefit more from Great Weapon Fighting, and anything that adds additional damage dice to your attacks, and remember you're making 3 attacks every round, benefits even more from Great Weapon Fighting. This is very valuable and an extremely powerful reason for even 1 level of Fighter, but Fighter keeps getting goodies, so let's keep taking levels of Fighter. And at level 2 we get, I remember I said Feral Instinct was the top 3 class features in the game. Well, here is the top 1 class feature in the game, Action Surge. Every short rest you get to take a whole additional action, taking your attacks in a round from 3 up to 5, and those are of course all fully functional main hand attacks. When you are making 5 additional attacks in a round, 5 attacks in a round, that's 50 Great Weapon Master damage even before the damage from your dice. Every Great Sword hit is average of 7 damage, so that's going to be 85 average damage, plus your strength, which at this point is only 20 more damage, but you can see that that takes your damage before any weapon enchantments or additional effects to over 100 in your Action Surge round. Incredibly strong and some of the best damage in the game. Fighter level 3, you get to take the Battlemaster subclass, and Battlemaster is so good for this build for 2 reasons. One is the maneuvers are just very strong. Tripping attack lets you avoid taking penalties from reckless attack by tripping an enemy to gain advantage against them, And Precision Attack lets you further mitigate the to-hit penalty of Great Weapon Master, allowing you to much more reliably land attacks. I think you definitely want those two. For your third, I think you most often are going to want Riposte, although Menacing Attack is also very good, so I would pick this one based on what you think is kind of more fun and cooler. Riposte gives you something to do with your reaction, which Barbarians often suffer from not having good uses for their reaction, whereas Menacing Attack gives you the access to the very powerful Frightened condition, although this is better to apply through ranged maneuvers than through melee maneuvers. As a melee character, frightening an enemy next to you is good, but not as good as frightening a melee enemy far away from you and preventing them from acting at all. So that being said, I'm going to suggest you take Riposte, but want to mention Menacing Attack as a valuable choice as well. And to round things off, we get to take our 4th level of Fighter, get our last feat, and maximize our strength. Obviously, getting up to 20 strength means that you do the maximum amount of damage and have maximum to-hit chance, and is very important for this character. Putting it all together, we have an easy and extremely powerful damage dealer for your character. You are going to have excellent AC for most of the game, so let me... or not excellent, but reasonable AC for most of the game, thanks to your 16 dexterity, excellent initiative, and incredible damage output, as well as decent survivability, just thanks to your very high hit points and rage bonuses giving you resistance against certain enemy attacks. You also do get Second Wind, which provides a very minor amount of healing, but something to keep in mind just from your fighter levels, that Second Wind is very valuable. Another thing to mention about Barbarians is that they wear buffs from allied party members, probably the best of any character in the game. So if you have a support caster able to cast Haste, able to cast Long Strider, even Enhance Leap, these are extremely powerful for your Barbarian and very important for your character's damage output. Barbarians, I think, are some of the best team players in the game as a result. Even though they don't provide any support to their allies, they wear support from allies so well that just having them present in your party enhances the effectiveness of your support casters significantly. A couple items that I think are worth mentioning. Generally speaking, you're going to want, because we get +6 base AC just from our unarmored... we get +6 base AC from unarmored defense and our dexterity. It's worth checking whether your unarmored clothing, such as this Bone Spike garb, is better for you at the moment than the best medium armor you have. Typically, you're going to be better off with medium armor, especially one of the medium armors that does not maximize your dexterity, that doesn't cap the amount of dexterity that you can gain from armor. But this is very valuable just to gain additional AC, so anything like the Armor of Agility that doesn't cap it can get you up to a very respectable amount of AC. Oh, I guess I've got these shoes on, but 20 AC is pretty... YouTube censorship warning for Karlach's feet, I guess. The AC on... 20 AC is very valuable for any character, and is comparable, although not quite as good as a dedicated tank, but still a totally respectable AC value. Recommend keeping anything additionally, like these evasive shoes, like the Cloak of Protection that gives you additional AC. You don't need it as badly as Paladin. I talked about this a lot in my Paladin build guide, but additional AC is still very valuable and will multiply well with your damage output. It's also worth mentioning that Karlach basically gets to double dip on Elixirs because you can use these soul coins to gain an additional d4 of fire damage on every attack. When you are critically hitting twice as often as other characters, thanks to Reckless Attack, the additional d4 has extra value as well, so it's worth keeping in mind that that's a very powerful option, and you definitely want to use that for Karlach. Even though her racial option is not as strong for Barbarian, her native ability is of course very good for Barbarian, especially for Berserker Barbarian, which makes additional attacks every round. One other quick thing to mention is that if you are using Hill Giant Elixirs, you can gain some additional feats. So the best feats to keep in mind are Savage Attacker. If you are taking Savage Attacker, you're going to want to switch your fighting style from fighter to defense instead of great weapon fighting, because the two don't play very well together. And Alert is, of course, always powerful. Sentinel is very good as well. Preventing enemies from getting away from your main damage dealer is extremely strong, and it gives Barbarians some more utility with their reaction attacks. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at a solid basic Barbarian build for Karlach. I think that this is going to be one of the best builds that you can do just throughout the game, and will stay relevant at every single level. There are no bad levels for this build, which is one of the things I like about it a lot. It also plays very well with a team because it wears buffs so well, and will allow you to target down important enemies on the battlefield and take them out very easily. As always, my friends, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed the video, definitely feel free to leave a thumbs up and a comment. Both of those things help a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game content. YouTube's also started surfacing whether or not people have notifications turned on for your channel, and that's usually a signal that they're using it in the algorithm. This is some like YouTuber stuff, so feel free to tune out now. But if you do turn on notifications for my channel, that will probably also help with the algorithm as well. You can turn off YouTube notifications if that annoys you. Alright, my friends, thanks for watching so much, and I will catch you next time.